All right. Today we're starting lesson 8, and this is a lesson that I'm going to discuss a little bit about the art of progressive living, but we're talking about the law of expectation this week. And you'll notice in this class as we go along that some things might seem a little bit redundant, meaning what you're going to be building and what we're going to be talking about the next couple weeks is going to feel a little bit like beliefs, PCD part 1, and a little bit about the law of belief, which we had earlier. Does anybody, and if please, hopefully someone will be brave enough to answer this question. Can anybody talk about what's the difference between the law of belief and the law of expectation? Is there a difference? Can you see, maybe there's some kind of a, is belief and expectation the same? Are they a little bit different? Are they kind of close? Are they cousins? Anybody have a thought on that? You can type in the chat as well, but I'm hoping for a little bravery here from somebody. I can see some of you thinking. Okay, so Danae says expectation is more of the results of your actions. Okay, good. And that ties in to values as well. So thank you for that, Danae. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, I'm going to dive into this then. And this might sound a little, what's the right term? Debbie says close cousins. I agree, Debbie. Thank you. I have mentioned a couple times that, and we all have things we deal with, right? And I'm comfortable enough to tell you that I'm a 60-year-old man nearly who most of his life has dealt with anxiety. And anxiety is a big problem today. I think it's a bigger problem than later. So this ties in, and I talked earlier about the law of belief and craft, right? How we can change our paradigms in the world. Well, I'm going to tweak what we talked about before. I'm going to give you a little different angle on it. And if some of you know people that deal with anxiety or depression, they're cousins, sadly. Often the same therapies and the same medications, those kind of things work for both. But Bobby Summers said, and we've had this quote before, but I'm just tweaking it a little bit. We always act in a manner that is consistent with our expectations, our self-image, our expectations. We'll typically achieve about what we expect to achieve. And I want to talk about how our thoughts and our self-talk affect our lives. So please, again, I'm going to keep this chat box open, but we've had this discussion before, how we view the world, tweaking a little bit as we look at how we expect things to be. If we expect to fail, we'll likely fail. If we expect to have something positive happen, we might have something positive happen. Now, sometimes there are things that are out of our control, and I'm going to share a little story today, not to be too what's the right term? This sounds a little bit like a confessional. I'm going to tell you a little bit what's going on in my life, not for any pity, but maybe for a little empathy is a cousin to pity, but empathy, a little love for what we're going through. Well, I'm going to introduce you to a talk that I think everybody should have in their toolbox of talks if you know of anybody who deals with anxiety or depression. And this is going to feel a little bit like craft, psychocybernetics. Now, as you guys, I don't know if any of you have actually practiced craft since we talked about it a few weeks ago. I love psychocybernetics. I'm a big proponent of it. I believe in it, but I've always been a little bugged by part of it. Does anybody have an idea on why maybe Steve Davis could be bothered about craft? Reprogramming your left and right brain so you believe things different. Anybody, as you've thought about it? This is a deep question, so I really wish I was teaching this face-to-face because we'd be having a lively discussion right now. Anybody have any ideas on why I might struggle with craft? Cancel, replace, affirm, focus, train. So I'm actually going to teach you a similar method, but it's different. Any ideas? Okay, for me, sometimes when you're dealing with a negative self-image or a negative belief, a false belief, you can spend so much time focusing on trying to overcome a fear that you become self-focused. You can become selfish, right? Well, this is another way to look at it in a different way. So, okay, I thought I heard maybe a comment. No? All right, so this talk is called Christ-Centered Healing from Depression and Low Self-Worth. And we call this the Wrigley Diamond. And I'm at the end in the email I send out to everybody, and you can choose to dive into it deeper. There's no, other than if you're interested in it, reason, necessarily great reason. I think it's a good reason, but I'm going to share you links to a couple things as I send my email out. Well, what happens in our lives is we have, oops, went the wrong way, we have things that happen that affect our relationships. This is the top of the diamond. We could have grief, transition, conflict, lack of some skills, abuse, loss of opportunity, disappointment, okay? Now, as many of you know, from what I've talked about before, I have an adopted African-American son. He's 14 years old, he's 6'4", and he's 210 pounds. The regional coaches tell us that Isaac is maybe the best 14-year-old basketball player in about 7 states. That's what we've been told. He's on BYU's radar as an 8th grader, okay? Well, that's all positive things. That's positive top of diamond things. But what we're facing is we live in a small, largely LDS community that is non-diverse. And right now, with all the stuff that's going on in the news, we are living that personal hell in reality. Now, no one's shooting at Isaac, no one's beating him up, but there are people in our community who are afraid of him or don't like him or are nervous about his size. They believe some of the negative stereotypes, and they have made false accusations and submitted them to the police. And I've been on the phone with our attorney today. We've been to court 5 times. Just this week, my son Isaac was playing the piano. You can see this piano right there. And he plays pretty well for a 14-year-old, but he doesn't practice without us like begging him to practice. Well, after we've been to court a couple days before that, he came in and was just playing some hymns and playing and playing. And my wife came in and found him. He stopped playing and he came in and she found him with his head in his hands, crying, bawling, and saying, "Mom, I wish I wasn't black. And why don't people see the good in me? And did you wish that you never adopted me?" Because he's scared. And so we have this top of diamond problem, right? And what happens for us, and it could happen, we have, all of you, none of you are going to go through life without having some of these hard things. What happens then, and I'm going to use Isaac as an example, it's going to affect his thoughts, right? And this is where this week's chapter in Victory comes in. We have 3 solutions to help negative expectations, or 3 problems depending upon what your expectations are: positive self-talk, positive vision, and proactive operating process, right? So Isaac's having all of these thoughts. I'm not good enough. People don't like me. What's wrong with me, right? I had a brother who died of brain cancer 12 years ago. I was going through grief. And at one point, I started having these thoughts about, what if I got the same cancer? And most people don't know this. I was born, even though this is a problem, I was born in 1960 in southern Utah. My brother was born in 1961. We were what we called downwinders, downwind of the nuclear tests that were going on in Nevada and floating across our state, Utah. So I have a higher likelihood of getting things like brain cancer, leukemia, a whole list of different things. Well, I didn't worry about it that much until my brother got brain cancer, and 14 months later, he's dead. So I started thinking, what if I get brain cancer? Isaac's thinking, why don't people like me? What's wrong with being black in my little town? Okay. So here's a question. What do you do if you are dealing with these self-defeating negative thoughts? Any ideas? I'm going to share my ideas, but I want to hear from you guys. Anybody? Chat's great. Talking's even better.
I remember in the chapter it talked about eliminating and just kind of like switching your thinking. So it uses the example of someone who is chronically late, and you have to tell yourself, like, I am not usually a late person. Okay. And then if you are late, then you say, sorry, I'm not usually late like this.
Yeah. What you described, Natalie, there was the proactive operating process. Perfect. It's not like me to be late, right? It's spinning it. Okay. Anybody else? Thank you for that.
I watched the TED Talk before class, and it talked a lot about changing your perspective on, these are the things that are all wrong in my life, and like that really kind of defines our future. Yep. So it's the TED Talk basically just talked about like finding the good in today, like being yep. positive in today. You don't want to look too far forward because that's all anxiety, and if you look back, there's depression or regret of mistake. And so what he basically talked about was just like living in the moment and to be grateful for the things that you already have.
Excellent. Yeah, you just described mindfulness. Elder Maxwell called that living in the holy present. Thank you, Sierra, for that. So here's just some ideas, right? You can have these negative or positive thoughts, worry and imagination, what if thinking, real versus imaginary dragons, left brain, right brain dynamic, those kinds of things, right? So 2 quotes on this. When you change the way you think, you change the way you feel, by Dr. Burns, and Dr. Rossman said, the discrepancy between the real and the imagined is the root of suffering. So I'm going to use 2 examples here, okay? This bottom line that you see here is reality, okay? I'm going to use my fear of getting cancer, okay? All of you who aren't downwinders, your chance, I'm just going to make up a number, but this will illustrate the point. Your chance of getting leukemia or brain cancer is 1 in 500,000, okay? My chance of getting leukemia or brain cancer is 1 in 200,000. So the reality is, in spite of the horrible thing that happened to my brother, the reality is I'm probably not going to get brain cancer. But I went through a season that led to real serious panic attacks, anxiety, not being able to sleep, because I was convinced that just because of the negative thinking, that just like my brother, I was probably going to get brain cancer and die. And I even started exhibiting some of the symptoms. So it's that discrepancy between reality and where our worry takes us, our negative self-talk takes us, that causes us to suffer. And the bigger the gap, the more we're going to suffer. So some ideas on controlling your thoughts. I still think craft, cancel, replace is a good idea. Sing a hymn, rehearse, memorize scriptures, inspirational quotes, mindfulness meditation. Sierra just mentioned that. Go out and do something positive, proactive operating process, and imagine success. I'm going to read this from Karina. I've actually could share this story, but I'm going to summarize what she says. We are likely to dwell and accept the thoughts we give the most time to. She's referring to a parable about which wolf do you feed. I want to keep this 30 minutes-ish, but that's a great point. Someone ought to look up that story. Okay. Any other thoughts on your thinking part? Thank you guys for that contribution. Sake of time, we're moving on. So one of my favorite quotes of all time is, weak is he who permits his thoughts to control his actions. Strong is he who forces his actions to control his thoughts. I've discovered that the best way for me to control my thoughts is, rather than sit there and be mired in an anxiety moment or a panic attack, it's better to just go out and do something productive. Okay, next. I'm going to skip this for sake of time. It's kind of cool. I'll send you an email. I'll include that in my email. Okay. What happens then is our negative thoughts or our positive thoughts result in positive or negative behaviors. Okay. Here's an example from my life. When I was worrying about having the same problem that my brother had, my most negative behavior, and don't ever do this, it's awful. Don't Google symptoms, okay? Because then if you're worried, you're just gonna think more about what could go wrong. And then don't start doing endless research on possible cures. I bought more self-help books. I ordered more natural supplements. My wife will tell you that we spent literally over about a 5-year period, thousands of dollars in all of that kind of stuff. So today, the talk that Sierra mentioned was the TED Talk that I sent out to you on Sean Achor. He's a positive psychology professor at Harvard. And he says that these are some activities that would be good, and he doesn't mention it that in the Wrigley model, but these are good activities that would be good bottom of the diamond activities. Every day, you should write 3 things down that you're grateful for. Keeping a journal, again, focusing on how the Lord's hand maybe would be in your life. Spend some time exercising, spend some time meditating, and go serve somebody. Those would be good bottom of the diamond things, in contrast to murmuring, crazy research, just binge watching Netflix, which is going to maybe mask the problem, but not make the problem go away. Okay. Then the next part of the diamond is your spiritual part. And the spiritual part is, you're going to be better off if part of your activities include reading your scriptures, staying close to your Heavenly Father, saying prayers. And what Carrie Wrigley suggests, I'm going fast because I don't want to overdo it, I got 9 minutes. You should do these 3 things. This is going to feel a little bit like craft. Identify your self-defeating thoughts, identify your self-defeating behaviors, and replace them with positive ones, and just practice those positive things. And in the end, it will impact and affect your relationships. Okay. I'm going to tell you one other way to do this. Any thoughts on this? Is this ringing true to anybody? Does this make sense?
I actually am kind of like going through this right now, is realizing like that I can be really hard and down on myself. And then whenever I kind of take a step back and realize all the things that I'm grateful for and all the things that I've been blessed with, like I have a lot to be grateful for. And so I don't know, that's kind of changing my perspective, at least for right now. Yeah. But like this lesson is really like ringing true for me.
It rings true for me. Thanks, Sierra, for that. Anybody else? Okay, so here's my journey, okay? I love this, but I'm also a huge fan of mindfulness and meditation. And when I was dealing with anxiety, I started doing some research, and I discovered a kind of a new therapy. And the name of the therapy is called acceptance commitment therapy. Now, if you know anybody who deals with anxiety, and some of us are going to be anxious at times, the big problem with anxiety is avoidance. We are going to do all that we can, all in our power, to avoid whatever's causing us pain. And for me, my anxiety turned into insomnia. I went for a long period of time where I wasn't able to fall asleep. And I tried prescription medicine. I tried counseling. I tried listening to soothing music. And I discovered when I went through acceptance commitment therapy that my problem was avoidance. So the first step of acceptance commitment therapy, there's the 3 steps. It's called act again. Accept that you're going to be having a struggle. Accept that you might not sleep that well tonight. Accept and almost embrace a panic attack when you're having it. And once I stopped trying to avoid falling asleep, I was able to fall asleep. Once I was okay with the sleepless night, it was no longer a problem. I was able to sleep, and I haven't had problems for years sleeping. Once I was okay with the panic attack, and if you've ever had a panic attack, I'm going to swear it's hell, right? Once I was okay to endure the 3 minutes of hell, the panic attack lasted for 30 seconds instead of 10 minutes. And I haven't had a panic attack in years, okay? The next step is while you're having this difficult time, and this is where it ties into the personal creed document you're building. I've seen it 2 ways. Choose your value or connect with your value. And I connected with my most important values from my personal creed document, my faith and my family, and then go act on your values. And sometimes I would go act on a value and I'd just say, you know what, I'm having a crappy day. I'm going to go serve somebody. I'm going to go play with my kids. I'm going to go call a friend and tell them I love them. The worry disappears. It's going to creep back, but it disappears. Well, my problem with acceptance commitment, very minor problem. This cured me largely. And I still have anxiety, but it's a managed anxiety. This really almost cured me 100%. But the problem with it is all of this book and another one, the name of the book that I would recommend is called The Happiness Trap. So I'm showing you there. Yeah, The Happiness Trap. There's nothing in the book about faith. And they kept saying, well, the reason we struggle with fear is because we descended from caveman, and our caveman ancestors, they woke up every morning with 2 questions on their mind. Am I going to eat or be eaten? And they lived in constant fear. And so I thought, I'm going to learn and try and craft this into a book about acceptance commitment therapy based upon gospel principles. So I wrote a little book called Breaking the Chains of Worry and Anxiety, and I based it on the lessons from Liberty Gel. And I'm going to teach you this very personally from me today because I need this reminder after the stuff we're dealing with our son Isaac. When Heavenly Father met Joseph, Joseph Smith is in Liberty Jail, and he's praying. He's in there for 5 months. He's freezing cold. He can't stand up straight. And it seems like Heavenly Father's gone silent because he's praying, "Oh God, where art thou? And where art the pavilion that hideth your covereth your hiding place?" Sorry. And finally, Heavenly Father answers him, "Joseph, know thou that all these experiences will be for your good, and your experience will be just a small moment." Quoted it poorly. But he gives 3 words. 3 words. If, and I'm going to go through this. The first word is if. If thou art called to pass through tribulation. And he lists 17 ifs. And then I'm going to use this with our son Isaac. If your son is falsely accused and they're threatening to send him into the juvenile correction system, and they're saying he can't, he has to admit guilt and he's going to be on probation for 12 months. And we know they're false. The accusations are 100% false, but a corrupt local cop has convinced a local district attorney, who I don't believe is corrupt, he just believes the cop, that our son is a bad kid. If that happens, then the next step is to know. Know thou, my son, that all these things will give you experience and will be for your good. And I'm going to be with you forever and ever. Me and my son Isaac. And then he tells us to therefore. Therefore, hold on. We're very much doing that right now. Fear not, and cheerfully do all things that lie in your power. And in the end, it will be for your good. Well, I had a religion teacher, Brother Nate Williams, teach me this in a lecture he gave not that long ago. I wasn't a student. He gave it as a benefit for some stuff I was doing. And as I was listening to this lecture, I'm thinking, Heavenly Father is teaching Joseph Smith acceptance commitment therapy. And here's how it matches. Accept. If you have these difficult times, accept the fact that Heavenly Father is there, that these negative thoughts are just part of life. And if you accept that maybe there's a reason behind it, there's a value behind it, you may have some peace. Accept that it's going to be temporary. Then you should know what your values are. You should know what your vision are. You're going to build personal creed document number 4 on your values, and you're going to write a mission statement in the end on your vision. Therefore, take action. That's your agency, and it'll be for your good. So here's an example. This is something that we came up with a couple of guys. One's a psychologist, one's a religion teacher, 2 religion teachers that helped me as we did the final version of my book. I should say our book. And we call this STAR squared with the A squared, okay? So when you have these anxious moments or negative things happening, the first thing to do is take a moment and just say to yourself, kind of like cancel, kind of like this, stop. Stop worrying, stop, take a breath, be in the moment, and then accept the fact that you're going through this difficult time and ask yourself, what do you really want? And then you act on that thing. You react in a positive way that's aligned with your values. Okay, 2 quick stories, we'll wrap up. Here's an example of acceptance commitment therapy in action, okay? This is my Uncle Wells. My Uncle Wells is my mom's oldest brother. He professionally was a psychologist and one of my greatest mentors of all time. He passed away this year at 85. When he was about 70, he had a massive heart attack, and only half of his heart functioned from that time until he passed away. Now, think about that. If you only have half a heart, and you only have half a heart for the rest of your life, you could do the negative part of the diamond. You could say, life sucks. I'm going to die in the next 6 months. Woe is me. Binge watch Netflix. He wouldn't have done that. Be grumpy, complain, lay in my bed, get sicker, and die. Okay? Well, what my Uncle Wells chose to do, he said, I still got half a heart. That's better than no heart. And I'm going to do a positive thing. And if we do acceptance commitment therapy, he's accepting the fact that his heart will never come back. But he values and loves getting outside and fishing. So every day, except Sunday, he would get in his truck, he'd put in his little pontoon boat, drive to the lake a mile from his house, and he'd get on that lake until he caught 5 fish. Does he look happy in that picture? He's ecstatic. And he lived 15 years with half a heart because he practiced the positive part of the Wrigley Diamond, and he also practiced acceptance. He accepted the fact that his heart's not going to be any good, but he accepted the fact, but he was celebrated the fact that it still worked and he could still go fish. Okay? This is Faja Zing. Faja Zing, when he was in his 80s, lost his wife. When he was in his 90s, he's out working in a field in India, and a storm comes up and picks up a sheet metal that was in the ground, and it spins through the air, and right in front of it, it decapitates his son, cuts his head off. His son dies right in front of him. Faja said, I could be mired in worry, I could be grumpy, I could be mad, and I'll just die at 90. Instead, he went to something that he loved, and that was running. This is Faja Zing running the New York City Marathon at the age of 102 because he acted on his value. So last quote, and then we'll end. And then just a little housekeeping on what we have left. President Packer, when he was still alive, taught it was meant to be that life would be a challenge. To suffer some anxiety, some depression, some disappointment, even some failure is normal. Teach our members that if they have a good miserable day once in a while or 7 in a row, right now, months of us dealing with a corrupt, I've got to be careful, a unfair situation for our son, to stand steady and face them. Things will straighten out. There is a great purpose in our struggle in life. So as an invitation to all of you, and I'm not doing this for any benefit for me. If you're interested, I would love to be your friend on Facebook. I'm telling you to ignore the GoFundMe campaign that my son set up for us. Please, you guys are poor college students. We have enough support for what we need. But I'd like you to scroll down, because they keep posting that at the top. Scroll down and see the picture of Isaac that I showed earlier in the class about him on the swing. And I want you to read our story of raising a young man in a white community. Just because we're not there yet when it comes to race. Pre-Isaac, and I say this in the little post that I made, and I'll make a link to my Facebook page. I'd love to be all your friends. I can promise you that I'm not going to say that I'm racist, but I've been prejudiced in the past, and maybe at times even a little bit racist. Because I grew up with white privilege. I grew up in Idaho and Oregon and Montana. I didn't see my first black person until I was a teenager. And we just have a ways to go. So please help us be better. So this week, you're watching a video on Team Hoyt, just a very brief paragraph. You don't need to spend a lot of time on it, tied to the law of expectation, your case study work, and your discussion thread, and the lesson evaluation. That's all for this week. No CRE document this week, none next week, but then more after that. All right, I've been over time just a bit. Any questions before I close the meeting? And I will stay on to visit, with any of you personally if you want to talk. Patrick, thank you. Acceptance commitment therapy is a really good practice. It's my favorite. That saved me. Okay, seeing no questions, we'll see you next week. I'll send out a few links in the email. If you want to dive deep into Carrie Wrigley, if you want, I'll send you the link about Sean Acor. If you watch it, let me know in the class meeting report. You'll get 10 points about extra credit. It's worth the 10 points. It's a 12-minute talk. It's actually really, really good. And we'll see you next week. Thank you all.